If anyone has a heroic voice, it's opera singer Ric Furman. Heldentenor Ric Furman is one of the great Wagner singers of our generation, having sung main roles in opera houses all over the US and Europe. In this episode of the Becoming Who You Truly Are podcast, Rick is going to share his humble beginnings as a middle school boy who got kicked out of choir to a man in his early 20s struggling to find his way in the competitive world of professional opera singer, to a mature adult who finally found his place and his footing in the expansive and eternal world of Richard Wagner's operas. Together, Rick and I are going to discuss his life story, both the triumphs and the tribulations, and he's going to share some deep psychological insights into some of his favorite characters to sing, including Sigmund, Tristan, Fidelio, and Peter Grabs. But before we jump into Rick's origin story, I'd like to share just a little behind-the-scenes clip that Rick and I had where we were talking about various different artistic projects that we had coming up. And I was sharing with him that I have a very big dream that I want to bring into reality. And he said, hey, man, just go for it. And that naturally led to a couple of other philosophical, artistic conversations about how perfection is not nearly as important as expression, the difference between making art for yourself versus making art for an audience, and more. So with that, I invite you into this episode where Rick and I have a little behind-the-scenes conversation about art and philosophy. Then we go into Rick's origin story, and then Rick shares with us wonderful life lessons from the operatic characters he inhabits. I speak Norwegian every day. I'm back working in the Norwegian church doing Oregon, but met some really good singers. And one of them, she actually sang opposite Stuart Skelton and Tristan last year. And anyway, I just said, hey, I sang a bit when I was in my early 20s. And they told me I would have to do like Donizetti and stuff like that. And I said I would rather play the organ and do Bach and early music. And because I really wanted to just sing Wagner. And they said, no, don't do it. I was like, now I'm, 36. Could you just hear me? And we've been working together the last 9 months now. And so that's been fun. I don't know if anything will come of it, but it's been really personally fulfilling to be in the world of Wagner now.
I think that's the main thing. When we take on, I don't want to call it a new project. When we push ourselves, the only way to go anywhere with anything is to try. And to push ourselves outside our comfort zone. And you do it and you think, well, this might be terrible, but let's see, let's try. And then when it's terrible, we say, okay, I don't need to do that anymore. Or we try it and we say, that's not exactly right, but maybe I could do this instead. And I think so often people are afraid to try something new, to push themselves outside their comfort zone. And therefore they never find out what they can be, what they can do. I think the greatest artists, and I shouldn't even limit it to artists, but that's just the realm that I know best. The people who achieve the most don't play it safe.
The older I get, the more I see the world really is kind of divided into people that sort of keep their heart close to the chest and the people that just throw their heart on the table and go for it. And what do you think is the difference? Like, what allows you to go out and sing in front of a bunch of people and be able to do that?
I had a teacher once when I was in grad school who said something really, at the time, it sounded like it was probably great information and profound. And it has probably is probably better information and more profound than I ever gave it credit for. He said, very simply, that people want to see ordinary people in extraordinary circumstances. When you're trying to be a god, when you're playing a god or something, well, that's less relatable. And the only way that the audience is going to care is when you start showing human emotions, human tendencies. And when you're playing a king, it isn't about the great things that this king accomplished. It's about the interpersonal dynamics that he, as a man, or she as a woman, if it's a queen, is what they experience. And I think when you are on stage, when you're putting yourself out there in whatever medium it is, in my case, when I'm on stage, I've got something to say. I've got something to offer. Is it going to apply to everyone? No. Is it going to be exactly what everybody else wants? No. Is it going to be the best that anyone's ever seen? No. Or I guess more to the point, I don't care. Because I'm not trying to appeal to everybody. I know that some people are going to be affected and some people aren't. The best audiences, the best consumers of art are doing it for a reason. The purpose of art is emotion. It's to be moved. It's to feel something. When people go to consume art, they want to feel. They want to feel something alive. They want to feel some kind of emotion. It might be that they get angry. They might get excited. They might laugh and think it's wonderful. They might fall in love. Whatever that case is, they want to feel those emotions. And so I operate under the assumption that the audience is already halfway there. They want to feel. I'm going to go up there and I'm going to give them something to feel about, some reason to let themselves go on that journey. And if they choose to go, that's what I want. And if they don't, I'll try again next time. And maybe next time I can help them. I can get them there. But what I have and what I am doing up there isn't totally the point. It's more about what the audience is experiencing. In a more selfish vein, I'm the one who actually gets to do it. I always say that the people having the most fun in any given performance are the people on stage. We're having so much fun. We're feeling things frequently so intensely, so deeply. We're the ones that get to make this amazing music. The audience is there to watch it and experience it through us. I love what I do, and I love the emotional journey. I have said for years that a performance is necessary, but I get just as much and frequently even more out of a rehearsal than I do out of a performance. Similarly, applause doesn't really do anything for me. You do it because, you want to show your appreciation for the audience, just like they're showing appreciation for you. Because without the audience, we don't get to do this. But it's not about the audience for me personally. It's about the journey that I have the privilege of going on through this show, whatever show that may be.
So you said that rehearsals are often more fun than the performance. I actually feel the same way. I know a lot of people don't, but for me, it's because when I'm by myself, I feel like I'm getting to solve the riddle of the music. I think composers give like a wink and a nod in a lot of their music, but there's also, sometimes it's very deep, but sometimes it's just like a little like, hey, did you notice that? When I perform, I feel like I'm being seen and almost like, I don't know, like I'm expected to be very close to perfect. But when I'm rehearsing, I feel like I get to just figure it out and there's no pressure. So that's why I like rehearsing better. Is there any other difference for you?
Yes. One quick tangent before I go back to that one. One thing that I would say about the desire to, when you're in a performance, to be perfect. As my wife likes to say, perfection is profoundly boring. If somebody gets up and does things perfectly, yeah, it's impressive. But it's not as exciting as when things aren't perfect, but they do it. they get there. They take you on this journey that is not, exactly within the lines. We want that messiness. Human life is messy. That's our existence. And if we see something that is completely perfect, it's hard to relate. When we look at those performers or those sports figures or anyone that we look up to and we see and we find this connection with, there are so often movie stars or TV stars are famous for having people look at them and say, I feel like I could be their friend. And that's the charisma jumping out off the screen and grabbing us. We want the same thing in whatever medium of performance it is. We want people to relate so closely to us that they go on these journeys with us. And if it's perfect, not many of us relate to perfect. So I would say, don't strive for perfection. Strive for the emotion and the meaning behind it. That would be my advice. To get back to the what I love about the process. I'm a bit different than many performers in that I do all my preparation myself. I sit here in my apartment, or right now I'm in Germany, and we have a small apartment here, and then we have a home in the U.S. And wherever I am, I love to sit down with the score and a piano and just discover the role, discover the person, to sing through it. And, inevitably I've heard whatever the show is 10 times, 100 times, however many times. And so I have a sonic model in mind. And as you're going through it and you're learning it and you're singing it, I find that I will come to a section and sing through it. And suddenly all of these pieces that I've collected through listening and through experiencing and maybe seeing a few performances here and there, suddenly they all come together and I go, whoa, that's me. I'm doing this now. This is so cool. And similarly, that happens on the first day of rehearsal. Sometimes it's a sing through, sometimes it's getting to do whatever scene, but there's often in the rehearsal process several moments where I go, wow, that was cool. This is my life. Those are the moments that I find a bit sometimes frustrating because it sort of pulls you out, but at the same time, we need to feel that appreciation for what we do. We get to be excited about it too.
Well, let's go back to the beginning. Tell us about how you got started singing. What was your early journey singing, and was there a burning bush moment? Like, for example, Deborah Voigt said when she was 13, God's voice came down from the heavens and said, "You will be a singer." Was there any burning bush moment, or was it something more gradual? How you found your way into the world of singing?
Well, I certainly did not have anything quite so clear. It was more gradual, and I think you could arguably say an accident of sorts. If you want to take it back to the beginning, as it were, I would refer to a story that I tell about my friend Joe. He was one of my best friends at the time. He sang in choir, and I loved hanging out with Joe. I didn't have anything to do specifically during that time frame. This was in junior high. I was, I don't know, 11 maybe, 10. No, probably 11 or 12. So I signed up for choir because I wanted to hang out with Joe. So I did. And it was fun, and I thought it was great. And then I got kicked out. In the words of the choir director, he was kicking me out because I had no talent. And if I minded my P's and Q's, maybe someday I could work on a show. And I thought, wow, that sucks. Oh, well. And so I kind of left it. A few years later, I was walking down the halls in high school, and it was toward the end of the year, and somebody jumped out and grabbed my arm. And startled, I looked at him, and it was the high school chorus director, chorus teacher. And he said, you can sing. And I said, no, not really. I've been told I don't have talent. And he said, sure you do. Come on. And he pulled me into his office and he had me match pitch. And then he said, you're going to sing choir with me next year.
Did he just hear the quality of your voice, or was he hearing you hum something, or how did he know?
I think he saw a male voice and said, good enough.
Fair enough.
The fact that I could match pitch and I wasn't, completely lost, I think he kind of said, no, I can work with this. And so he did. And after singing in high school for a little bit, we did what is it called? When you go someplace, field trip. We did a field trip and went to a university and worked with some professors there. And there was somebody who said, you're going to come here next year and you're going to study voice with me. And I said, well, I've already decided. And yes, I am coming here, but I'm actually going to study chemical engineering. And so I appreciate it, but I've already got a plan. And he said, well, you can still do that and take lessons, and then we'll pay for you to go to school. And I went, well, that sounds pretty good. So I did that. And then I think he tricked me, because by the end of my time in undergrad, I was having way more fun singing than I was with chemical engineering. Don't get me wrong. I love chemical engineering, and I still do. I still nerd out with all that stuff. But I was having so much fun, and I felt like there was something there. So I ended up saying, I think I'm going to go, with the encouragement of my voice teacher at the time, I'm going to go back to school at a different school, a conservatory, and see if I can really do something with this.
And you went to Cincinnati, which is just a gravy train for opera singers. What is it about that school that produces so many good singers?
It's hard to say exactly what's in the magic sauce, but from my experience, it is small. My cohort in my master's degree, we started with 24 people, 16 finished. That's not a lot. When I got there, I'd been kind of a big fish in a small pond, at my undergrad, or at least that's the way I felt. I don't know if it was actually true, but that's what I felt. And so I managed to get into CCM, the University of Cincinnati College Conservatory of Music. Like you said, wonderful school, one of the best in the world. And I thought there was no chance I was going to get in after hearing other people auditioning the same day I did, but somehow they picked me. When I got there, I thought, okay, I am going to show up. I am going to kill it. I'm going to be on top of everything. There's going to be no stopping me. I'm going to be amazing. And I went in there and I showed up. I brought my best self. And you know what? So did everybody else. They were so encouraging. There was no cutthroat. It wasn't this ugly dog-eat-dog world that sometimes happens, especially when there's more and more and more competition. Everyone you'd get up and you'd perform something and people go, wow, that was so good. I love this. You did this so well. And this was, I love your tone. This is so great. Wait, oh, sorry. I got to go. It's my turn. But seriously, you were so good. And then they go up and they kill it. And you go, seriously? I'm competing with that? So I felt and still feel like the talent level and the commitment, the camaraderie, and the competition were so high there that if you were willing to commit yourself and really, really try, you would get something special out of yourself. And somehow that was my experience, along with many other people. It was very competitive, is still very competitive. And there are many people that didn't make it through. To the best of my knowledge, I don't think the conservatory ever asked anyone not to stay. I think they always tried to keep people. But it was high pressure and it was a lot of output, and not everything was smooth. But for me, that environment worked. It was encouraging and demanding. And at the time, that's what I needed. I needed that safety, but that push.
When did you first find Wagner, and when did you first think, oh, I can do Wagner?
Oh, certainly not during conservatory. you know, Wagner is for people that stand 14 feet tall and are the sun always shines on them, and they're not human.
Speaking of that, there's a guy here in Oslo who's currently making moving up into Botan in the next maybe 5 years or so, and he's like 6'7".
And I'm 6'3", and I am almost never the tallest person in the cast. You see photos of bows, and you see like the lineup of people, and you look at me and you're like, yeah, okay, there's a guy, he's fairly normal, but that guy over there, he's tall. It's like, well, yeah, he's like, yeah, like 2 meters tall. He's a giant, and then you look at me and I just appear normal. But yeah, I always had the idea that Wagner singers were this superhuman other species. And so the idea of me singing Wagner was never something I thought of or considered. When I went to CCM, I went as a baritone. I had started in college as a bass baritone, but that was never really right. I quickly transitioned to baritone, and did that even all the way through grad school. Although when I was at the conservatory, I had started transitioning to tenor. But I was doing, the Italian lyric type repertoire, and I always felt like a fish out of water. It was so hard. I looked at other people and they just did it, and they made it look so easy and so natural. And I felt like I was, having to put myself in this box and fight through it and somehow make it seem natural and effortless. And I had some success and things went okay, but it was never great. And that was true when I was singing, lyric baritone, or when I'd switched to lyric-ish tenor. And I certainly got a lot of the dogma that so many singers get. People who are listening to you, if there are singers who are going to listen to this, the people who are listening to you, there's a really, really good chance that they do not understand voices, and there is a near surety that they don't understand your voice. Don't let somebody else tell you what you are or what you aren't. That has to come from within. I was told for years that I should never sing anything heavier than Mozart. I sang some Duke in Rigoletto, and I had success, but also people telling me, don't do that, it's way too heavy for you. I even had some success singing Rodolfo, but that was a struggle, and people always said, don't sing that much. It always felt like everyone would tell me Mozart or earlier, but that was always so hard for me.
Those roles sit just a little bit higher than the German tenor rep, like that Italian lyric tenor rep. The whole opera just sits like maybe a half step higher than, for example, Wagner rep or German repertoire. Was that the challenge for you, or was it something different?
No, I think you're right. I think that was a big part of it. Just that how it was written. Where was the middle point? Some parts, Verdi, for example, is will kind of hang out high and then slowly get higher, and you never really get a reset. Whereas Puccini is full of resets. You listen to Verdi and he's constantly going, and you're thinking, okay, well, I just, strangled myself trying to sing that. Whereas Puccini is too busy going, and it's more angular, and it jumps and allows you to reset. And some people are more built to take those gradual steps up, and it doesn't bother them. Other people need those resets that come from Puccini. Some people don't like the angular, those jumps. They have a hard time not carrying the weight. So it just depends how they're built.
If those were the ways you would describe Verdi or Puccini, how would you describe Wagner's melodies?
Wagner's melodies are they're nearly incidental. They need to come from the spoken point, the place where you're still speaking, but they also, it's a melody that doesn't, it's not a 4-bar phrase. It's not something that fits on a page or even two. It's something that you get to the point after you've gone 6 pages. And that's where you see the overarching melody. And sometimes in those 6 pages, you might have a whole page of just orchestra. It's there. The phrasing is so wide, so broad with Wagner. And I think that can be seen a lot in what is valued more in a singer who's singing Rossini or Puccini or Donizetti, or even something bigger like Verdi. There is such a value put on the beauty of the tone and the cleanliness of the approach and the onset, whereas you hear people singing Wagner, and you will certainly find those same things, but you also find people that are very successful that don't have those things. And you think, okay, so what is it that makes somebody more successful in Wagner? And, it's beauty of tone is never wrong. That's never a bad thing. It's never going to be something where somebody says, oh, that guy's voice is just too beautiful. I don't
know. Sometimes in Wagner, I wish that they would be a little bit more raw. For example, Ben Hebner is like a legend, but everything was always so beautiful when he sang. It was so beautiful. And sometimes I wanted him to just hammer me.
Well, and where he came from, what his background was. He came from Rossini, Bellini. He came from bel canto. He had a more full voice than many of the people singing that, but that's where he came from, and that's how he approached everything, even when he was doing Tristan. He allowed more of that baritonal color to come into his voice as he, progressed through Wagner. But he, certainly approached everything very lyrically, which, don't get me wrong, that's commendable. But what I think you touched on is, you could say frequently the same thing with Verismo opera. I keep mentioning Puccini, but it doesn't have to be Puccini. Let's look at I Pagliacci, and you're thinking about the Vesti la Giubba, and you have these huge passionate moments where if somebody gets up and sings this beautiful, pristine, yeah, that's great. It's beautiful. But you want somebody who's going to and who's going to cry through it and is going to have this great passion. And I think the same is true with Wagner. These things were all written more or less the same time. And in this Verismo real life, real drama, over the top, some people might say, emotional portrayals, people don't always want just beauty. They want passion and emotion, and sometimes it isn't strictly beautiful. And I think that's what sometimes is missing when that's what's missing when you have an overly bel canto approach to Wagner. So, it doesn't have to be, it's never wrong to be beautiful, but it's not always, but it's better in these cases to err on the side of passion than it is on beauty and technique. And I won't say technique, that's a hairy subject, but it's more important to sing it with the proper emotion and emotional impact. That's more important than singing it beautifully. Maybe the fact that I feel that way is why I'm built, for lack of a better word, more towards singing Wagner than I am to singing, bel canto.
Well, unfortunately for me, in my early 20s, I spent 6 months in the opera house that you've sung at, the Leipzig Opera, as Leipzig for 6 months, and I heard almost every Wagner opera while I was there. and Wagner was born there. And I don't know if you ever crossed her paths, but soprano named Christian Labor was singing there a lot that year.
I had one of my major debuts with her, actually.
Oh, okay. Which one?
A long time ago, Fidelio in Seattle.
And she sounds great on recordings, but man, she sounded infinitely better live in the opera hall. I think you can't really record dramatic voices. And she just changed my life hearing her over and over. So ever since then, I haven't had any interest in bel canto opera. And yeah, that experience spoiled me, made me a full-fledged Wagnerite. I'm very proud of that.
Yeah. No, she had these amazing overtones that you can never really capture overtones with a microphone. But she has, and still has, this ability to sing with purity, and somehow the room is just filled with sound. Just about a year ago, just under a year ago, I ran into her singing at the Concertgebouw. We were both singing a Walküre there, and it was great to see her again and hear her again and hear that voice again.
I cut off a little bit your journey. So you were talking about how you went from Mozart to Verdi to early music, but you still hadn't quite found Wagner. So how did you get from where you were in the beginning stages of your career to where you are now? Was that also gradual, or was there a moment where you said, I'm going to be a Wagner singer, and damn everybody else, I'm going to make it happen? Like what happened there?
No, 100%. There was a moment when I just did it, and it was, it was my decision. It was a clear decision. It was one of the best lessons of my life, and one that I would wish to pass on to any aspiring or even existing singer who's just making their way through this world the way we all are. So I'd been singing with various degrees of success for a number of years, struggling to get through, struggling to get by, and I had an opportunity to sing in a production of Die Meistersinger von Nürnberg. And I thought, I'm not exactly a Wagner singer, but I realized that, I was one of the, what they call the Kleinmeisters, one of the Meistersinger. And I thought, well, not really my thing, not what I would typically do, but yeah, I could do it. And they need somebody, and I need a gig. So I thought, okay, let's do it. And so I did it.
In Meistersinger, they tend to use lighter voices in the opera anyway. So
they do. Yeah. You don't need to have a Wagnerian voice to sing. Interestingly, in Wagner, there are a lot of parts that non-Wagnerian singers can sing. It's really only the principal singers that, generally anyway, it's only the principal singers who need to have that more Helden, type voice. So I thought, yeah, why not? I'll do it. I need a gig. So I did. And it's like I could breathe. So often when I was singing, it always felt like I was putting everything in a box, and I had to be really careful, and everything felt a little bottled up, and I would struggle to get through it. And it wasn't that I just wasn't letting it out. I was trying to let things out, but it always felt stuck somehow. And then when I sang this Meister, it worked. Everything worked. It felt easier, freer, just kind of felt better in every way. And I thought, well, that's fun. I didn't think too much of it, but the conductor in the piece, and also a number of the other people who did have more experience in that world, told me, hey, you might want to look into this. This might be a thing for you. And, I'd always kind of thought that I would sing bigger rep someday, not Wagner, because I wasn't, as I said, 14 feet tall. It wasn't this other species that is a Wagnerian singer. So I thought, well, I always thought I would sing something bigger, but great. Thank you. I'm glad that sounded nice. I'm glad you liked it. And then I went away. Well, coincidentally, right after doing that was partway through the year, and then that was like in July or August or something where I sang that. And then that fall, I had a bunch of auditions in both the US and Europe, and singing again, lyric tenor. Got through with those. Some auditions went well, some not so well, and then I continued doing the jobs that I had lined up, which went into March. And I got into March, and I finished my last contract, and I had nothing. From all the auditions I'd done, from all the anything I'd ever done, I had nothing. And I thought, wow, okay, what do I do now? So I was looking around trying to find companies that might be casting this late, and different contacts that I had that I might be able to ask people, bug people, see what I could drum up, so that I didn't have this, so I didn't just fade away. And wasn't having any luck. I can remember specifically the day that I was trying to figure it out, and I was like, I don't know. I mean, I always thought I would sing bigger stuff, so I guess I'll do it. What's the worst thing that could happen? I won't get hired. I'm doing that right now. So I walked upstairs into my studio, grabbed, of all things, a Siegfried score. Dumbest thing.
In your opinion, what's harder, Siegfried or Tristan? Everyone says it's one or the other.
Well, I haven't done Siegfried on purpose. I think whatever the person says, I think they're right, because they sit slightly differently. If you're somebody who's good at Tristan, that doesn't mean you're necessarily good at Siegfried, and vice versa. In fact, frequently the best Tristans are not the best Siegfrieds, and so for me, Siegfried's way harder. I've done some. I've sung some of it. I've done rehearsals. I've learned it, but I feel better with Tristan personally. But on this specific day, for some reason, well, because I had no clue what I was doing, I went up and I grabbed a Siegfried score, put on a recording, and sang through it. And the thing is I actually sang through it. And I got to the end, and certainly it was far from perfect. It was far from being acceptable, but I got through it and I did it. And at the end, I didn't feel destroyed. And I thought, well, that's interesting. So I put that away and I started looking around. What do people sing if this is what they sing? Like, what's something that I could learn? What's something that I could take to my teacher? So I learned I think I went into my voice teacher with 3 pieces, and I could be wrong about these, but I think I went in there with Infernum Land from Lohengrin, Gott welch dunkel hier from Fidelio, and Kella mi creda from La Fanciulla del West. And I'm almost certain I plopped down in front of him Infernum Land. Nope, I'm wrong. I did the forging scene from Siegfried, and I put that in front of him. And he listened to it, and he listened, and I finished it, and he just said, okay, let's find something else. And that was the day that I switched rep. That was the moment in my career where I switched what I do, and it made and that changed my life. After that, we worked on it for a little bit. We got some repertoire put together. My voice teacher, who had been a very a world famous singer and successful and all these things, he arranged 2 auditions. One was for his former agent, not so that I could get an agent, not so that I could get representation, but just so I could get feedback, so that I could get information. And the reaction was fine. I didn't feel like I really got a particularly good response or good information or anything notable from that, audition. And then subsequent, sit down and chatting about how things could go, might go, should go. But then the second one was, do you know the name Spate Jenkins?
No, I don't.
In my opinion, for what it's worth, he was the last great impresario, specifically in the U.S., but maybe in the world. It's hard for me to say. He is best known for his time spent at Seattle. He helped produce a number of ring cycles and was known a little bit as the Wagner guy in the U.S. And I went in there that day and I sang Fidelio for him and his assistant, who's also tremendously talented. And I sang for them. I didn't really know who they were. I mean, I knew who they were, but I didn't know much about them. And I sang, and Spate asked me a few questions and talked to me for a little bit. And he said, okay, well, later we're going to have our the Rio test, but for now, could you just sing, I don't know, let's say Infernum Land. I don't remember what it was, but sing something else. And I said, yeah, sure. So I did. And he talked to me a little bit more. And then he asked for a third piece. And when I finished the third piece, he came around the table, shook my hand, and offered me my first contract. And it was a better role at a better house with better, fees than I had ever seen. And from that moment on, I've never stopped working. Everything in a way fell into place because I found myself in a situation where I said, I'm not getting hired. What am I going to do? I'm going to go do this. And if I don't get hired, I'm already doing it. So who cares? And I sort of stopped listening to those people who said, no, don't sing that big a rep. Only sing Mozart. At most, Mozart or earlier. And I stopped listening even to my own voices that were saying, no, you can't sing that because that's something that other people do. That's something that is so far beyond you and your capabilities and the way you're built. And I just went for it because something inside me said, this is what you should try. And it worked.
That goes back to what you said at the top of about the most successful people in life are the ones that just take chances. You said something along those lines at the beginning.
If you play it safe, then no one's going to care. No one's going to know.
When you were talking about your first Wagner experience and Meistersinger, and you were talking about you felt like you could breathe. Someone asked me just a few months ago, like, why I love Wagner so much, because there were several Verdi productions here in Oslo, and I went with a friend, and I was like, whatever, Traviato, Taylor, like, it's fine. Like, I don't consider that opera, is what I told them. And they said, well, why are you such a snob? Why do you only like Wagner? And I said, well, when I go hear these operas, I'm like, okay, I'm listening to singing. But when I go to Wagner, when I hear Wagner, especially live, I feel like there's room enough to breathe. As I said, almost the exact same thing. Like, spiritually, emotionally, there's just so much room. You could just expand. It's like going from living on planet Earth to living on the universe. It's just so big. And I feel so loved, safe, accepted by the music. And yeah, there's just room to breathe in Wagner. So that was very interesting that you said the same thing technically.
Yeah. And, and I think you hit on it. Yes, technically, yes. But also emotionally, spiritually, I felt like I'd come home. And still to this day, I think of Wagner as my home. That's where I am most comfortable. And, I love Strauss. Strauss is the most fun. He's a wizard. Singing Strauss brings things out of you that you never knew you were personally capable of. Because if you sing Strauss just a little bit wrong, you're doomed. It's going to be so punishing, so difficult. You're going to feel like you're carrying a truck. But if you sing it right, somehow your voice, your body, everything works so freely that you almost feel like you didn't know you were capable of doing such a thing. And you turn around and you look at what you just did and you say, wow, that was me? That was crazy. So I find Strauss to be so much fun. because he's like a wizard. He does things that you never thought were possible. But when I come to Wagner, that's home. That's where I can breathe. That's where I can really just let myself go.
So wait, you were talking about the melodies of Verdi, Puccini, Wagner. Describe Strauss.
Strauss is like Wagner's weird eccentric uncle. He's, although he's younger, but his orchestrations are unlike anyone else. So the whole tone and feel of his operas are different from everyone else. It's not this huge, rich lushness that you get with Wagner or Mahler or Puccini or Bruckner or somebody. It feels more like a chamber opera almost, even when there are lots of people. Die Frau Schatten has a pretty big orchestra, but Ariadne auf Naxos doesn't. It's not, but they both have that same intimacy of tone. You look at things like Electra or Salome, and those don't have the biggest orchestra, but the sounds that they create, you don't know how big it is, because there are moments where it's so big and other moments where it's almost feels like nothing's happening, where a single clarinet playing a rising melody almost feels like the only thing happening within the orchestra. He's able to get this amazing tone and texture. And so you find yourself, when you're singing it, you become a slave to the notes and rhythms that he has written. There isn't wiggle room for you to be late, for you to go off on your own adventure, like if potentially you can in Wagner or Puccini or something like that. He is very strict. And if you're not doing what he said, it sounds like you're not doing what he said. When you can give yourself in, when you can give yourself to that, to the score and to what's there, in the words of Toscanini, "Sono schiavi della partitura," or something close to that. We are slaves to the music, to the score. And if you can give yourself like that to Strauss, this freedom and ease comes with it that is unlike anything else. It is really angular. You jump all over the place. You're singing very high and then you're singing very low, and you think, I'm never in the same key for more than 4 notes in a row. How does this make music? But then when you take a step back, it does. To be honest, that's not unlike some parts in Wagner. You sing some things in Wagner, you sing Parsifal or Sigmund or something, and these are melodies that sound like melodies. If you're sitting in a room all by yourself with a piano, it sounds like you're singing a melody. You turn around to something like Tristan and you go, this never sounded so atonal to me before. Why is this so non-functional? I'm not singing in one key. These notes don't make sense. But when you listen to it in the context of the orchestra, nothing sounds strange. It all sounds consonant. And I think it's not, those things are similar between the two, but you feel it so much more in Strauss. You need to know where you're going with Strauss, or you're done.
Well, you just mentioned my 3 favorite Wagner characters, Sigmund, Parsifal, and Tristan, all in the same sentence. So I was wondering, the thing I love, Parsifal is my favorite opera. And the reason I love it so much is because I feel like it tells the story of my life. There's this boy who's a bit naive. He meets someone, he gets corrupted by that person. And then through the pain of that corruption, he learns wisdom, compassion through wisdom. And hopefully I'm getting to that last part, but it's I don't know. I think you could sum up all of Western psychology in that one opera. And so that's why I go to listen to Wagner's, because I just feel like there are these just great truths in it. And I go for the emotional reason and to be thrilled by the singers, but also for those deep um, psychological lessons that are in his music. So I was wondering if you could take us through anything you've learned, maybe, I don't know, starting with maybe Sigmund. Like, what is there for the audience to learn from Sigmund? What have you learned from Sigmund about like how to live life?
I think Sigmund is a great character to start this with, but also just a great character. The amazing thing about Sigmund is, as you're playing him, he's amazing. He's brave and strong and moral, and he's all the things that most people wish they could be. Let's ignore the fact that he's in love with his sister. Let's not talk about that. But anyway, as far as what type of human being he is, he's the type of person we would all aspire to be. His strength and courage and conviction and selflessness, is amazing. When they ask about him, Hunding asks about him and wants him to tell his story, and we start hearing these things, and he is not the star of his own show. These stories he tells, he is not telling about the great things about himself because he doesn't see himself that way. And I think that's something that we can all, to a degree, take from Sigmund in this case. We look at our lives and we know the terrible things we've done. We know the embarrassing moments, those times when, we tripped and fell, the times when we did not live up to our own expectations. We are not impressed with ourselves. But then we meet other people and they seem to be impressed with us sometimes. And we think, well, that's because they don't know. But that's the point. They don't know. And so you don't have to be just that person. You get to be who you are starting today. And Sigmund finds himself in a situation that is unideal in so many ways, and he rises to be the best version of himself in that moment. And the audience is left looking at him and saying, man, I wish I could be more like that.
That's so interesting. Someone the other day, I actually know from the opera world, she told me that it's like, Patrick, you just exude confidence. And I said, look, sweetheart, I am the most insecure person I've ever met. I wake up every day afraid to be alive. And she was like, yeah, but no one knows it. Like you seem like a very confident person. So that's interesting. I was thinking about her comment while you were talking about Sigmund.
I think that's exactly it. I think that's it. You're right.
Well, I'm just guessing it. Would that be is that the easiest Wagner Opera that you sing?
Maybe. Yeah. That's not to say it's easy. I think the reason it might be what I might call my easiest, I think the reason that I would say that would be because it's the one that I have the most experience with. It's the one that no matter how I'm feeling, no matter how excited, tired, annoyed, frustrated, whatever I'm going through personally, I know how my voice is going to react. I know how to get from A to Z in that role. I understand the drama. I understand what everyone else is going through. So put me on stage doing that role, and I'm confident that I will get through it, not just survive it, but be able to do something meaningful and hopefully beautiful with it.
So what next character can you dish out about?
I think maybe Florestan. I mean, that's not Wagner, but
Kissing cousin.
Yeah. He, Florestan, we see him at an interesting moment in his life. And it's one that did not come and still does not come naturally to me. We see him from the moment we see him, he is at the lowest and weakest point of his life. He's starving to death. He's been imprisoned underground for years. He's been denied all human dignity. And he's not even allowed to see other people. And we see him in this moment, and that's where it starts. And I think for me personally, I have a hard time playing into weakness, playing into being less than my best version of myself. And you can certainly say, oh, but he needs to find that greatness still within himself. And he does, but he doesn't find it through his own agency. He finds it with the help of this young, we think, the audience, well, no, we know, but what is, supposed to be this young boy who is a turnkey for the prison warden. That turns out to be his wife in disguise. But he doesn't know. He just thinks that this person showed him this unusual kindness. And from that, he finds just enough food for hope to keep him going. And he continually is finding one more glimpse of hope, one more reason to continue. And if I was going to say, what do we learn from him? I think I would say, no matter how weak or unable we are to do anything about our situation, no matter how lost we feel, find one more reason to keep going. Because it might not be in the first number, it might not be in the second number, it might not be in the third number, but at some point, somebody might come along and give you a little bit of bread and a little bit of water and a kind word, and you never know where that's going to go. You just keep on keeping on, and you might find your freedom.
As you were talking about Florestan, I was just thinking about this idea of the hero's journey that goes through all the Western stories that, what was his name? Joseph Campbell. He came up with this idea of the hero's journey. And basically, like in all of our lives, but also every story that we love, we hope to find this wise elder, this person that can give us the bread or give us the little piece that we need. And and that gets us the hope to slay the dragon or whatever it is.
Yeah. And, there is this interesting shift throughout time where, if you go back far enough, the hero was always the hero. No matter their situation, they were the hero. And then it comes along a little bit later that the hero is a hero, but needs just a little bit of help. And then when they get that little bit of help, that little nudge, that little boost, then they can become who they were always meant to be, and that's also in a way interesting. But, if we fast forward through various iterations, we get to today where people say, well, no, I don't need somebody else to help me. I am the hero of my own story. I have all my own agency. And in a way, we've sort of done a full circle. Because that's not so different from I've always been the hero, rather than saying I will find that greatness within myself. And I think it doesn't matter where it comes from. I don't think it's a bad thing to look to other people or to get help from other people or to find it within yourself, whatever it takes.
And as you said earlier, the king is only interesting when he shows his human side.
Yes. Yeah. We want to relate. We want to feel like either I know that person or maybe even I am that person.
Okay, can we shift now to Tristan?
Yes. Yep.
Okay. Help me with this one because I have many mixed feelings about Tristan, okay? First of all, Wagner created this epic love story. Yeah, in his own life, his love relationships were just a shambles.
Yes.
I don't know. I've always wanted something as big as Tristan, a love story that big. I don't think it can actually exist in reality, but I would like it to.
I think it is possible with when it's framed the right way. And I think it is nearly never framed the right way by people who consume it. Wagner didn't experience the majority of the things that he wrote about, but he had this remarkable ability to empathize. I'm not exactly sure what to call it. He wrote Der Fliegende Holländer before he'd ever been on a ship, but he had to write the waves and the sea and have this feeling of the maritime life. Not bad, and so the idea of his life being romantically in turmoil doesn't surprise me in the least. And I don't think that necessarily precludes him from writing the greatest love story ever. Not saying that that's what Tristan and Isolde is, but you can make a case for it, I suppose, if you want to.
When I tell my friends about Tristan and Isolde, they tell me that's a cautionary tale. That can't happen in real life. That's dangerous. People that don't know opera, who are more grounded in reality than in the artistic world.
Well, we can say that it's not realistic and that it's a cautionary tale and it would never happen in real life. But in my opinion, it happens in real life all the time. And probably either has happened or will happen to the majority of the people that say that it could never happen. Tristan and Isolde didn't specifically fall in love with each other. They fell in love with this moment. They fell in love with this circumstance that had enough of what was already within them that they felt helpless and couldn't help but give in. And they threw caution to the wind. And they said, this might blow up my life. But in this moment, I don't care. And it didn't stop there. It went on until it did blow up their life. And you know what? It made everybody around them miserable too. Is there anyone who wouldn't listen to that and say, sheesh, I've been there? Either for themselves or somebody close to them. That they found themselves in a situation where they gave in, let it go too far, and hurt everybody around them. And the emotions were real. The experience was deep and powerful and life-changing. I think that applies. I don't think that that's not possible. I think it happens all the time. And if you want to call it a cautionary tale, maybe, but no one's going to hear it. No one's going to listen to that and say, I'm feeling this way, but I saw Tristan and Isolde, so I'm not going to do that. No. If you fall into it, and you're done. That's what it is. If you're the type of person who isn't going to fall into it, it doesn't matter whether you've seen Tristan and Isolde, it doesn't matter whether you've heard this story or not. You're going to be okay. It is what it is. The fact that it is such a common human experience where we put ourselves in a situation where we throw caution to the wind, follow our passions, knowing that it probably won't end in a fairy tale way. The fact that we can all, or so many of us, can really relate to that is why it's still one of the most loved operas of all time. One of the greatest operas and greatest stories ever written. So that's what I would say to those people. Sorry. I feel like I went a little deep there, a little deeper than maybe we were intending.
No, I loved. Well, I think you were talking about Wagner. You always have to go deeper than intended.
Oh, no, you're exactly right.
There's no shallow in Wagner. It takes him 20 minutes just to get to the first thought.
You are right, because everything, my wife, I've got 2 kids, and frequently I will try to talk to my kids about something. I'll tell them a story. I'll have something that I need to impart to them because I have wisdom and you need to hear this. And I never get to my point before they're just off, or they can't hear, or they just go, can I have something sugary? Yes, fine. And my wife inevitably, when that happens, just looks at me and goes, too long. And I feel like maybe that's why I get along with Wagner so well, because yeah, I'll take 20 or 30 minutes to get to my point. But that's not what works for some people. Wagner takes a long time to get to his point. I do too. So it works, I suppose.
Is Tristan hard for you to sing?
Oh, yes. Yeah. Tristan, no one sings Tristan and says, yeah, that's easy. There are people who get done with it and say, okay, this isn't too bad. This is something that I can do. And luckily I'm in that position, because the vast majority of singers, even when they get into this repertoire, Tristan's a lot.
And what are the challenges about it? Because it sits lower than almost any other Wagner Heldentenor role.
I think because it is so long, it is it feels unending. It feels like you get done with the first act, and that's not so bad, because that feels like a normal opera, but that's the point.
And that's mostly Isolde anyway.
Yeah, it is. It's the Isolde show. You can make a point that Tristan and Isolde, the first half of Isolde and the second half is Tristan. You can even say it begins to become Tristan at O Sinker nieder, or something like that. And you can, okay, fine. I'm not going to argue one way or the other about that one. But what I do know is you do the first half of the first act, and that's like doing an opera. You don't do nearly as much as you do in the other acts, but I've sung a number of roles in my life that aren't as long as just first act Tristan. And it doesn't feel like a whole lot because you're viewing the whole, and the audience doesn't feel like a lot because Isolde's been singing so much. And then you get to the second act, and it feels like it's never going to end. And it sits a lot higher. You start off right off the bat singing Isolde with an A flat on top, and the whole first 40, 50 pages of Act 2, I mean, once he enters anyway, you never get away from the staff, from going above the staff. Every phrase, pretty close to every phrase, goes above the staff. It's a lot, and it's high. And that only gets you to the end of the duet. After that, you've got more singing to do, including an aria, which isn't overly high, but it's more singing. And the third act is as much as the first and the second act put together, with no breaks, with all the highs and all the lows, and it just feels grueling and punishing, like it's never going to end. So if somebody says Tristan's easy, either they're lying or I think they're just lying. I don't think anyone gets done with Tristan and actually feels like, oh, that was easy. There are some people there's some people that finish it and you feel like, man, that did not seem like they were working super hard. That felt like they could do it again, maybe. Great. You're supposed to feel like they could do it again. They couldn't. Even the ones that feel like they could, they couldn't. They might be able to do some parts, but they wouldn't be able to do the whole thing again. So one reason that I think it's hard is just simply the length. But then you also touched on the fact that it's low. And frequently, when you're singing a lot in the lows and mids, you have the option to broaden your sound, to sing bigger and wider and heavier down there, which is going to come at the expense of the top. And it takes mostly just experience and discipline to know how much you can give on the bottom before it starts costing you too much on the top. And I think the majority of people, if they try to take on all those lows, because you still have to put out a lot of sound when you're singing down there. The orchestra is not suddenly smaller because you're singing low notes. The orchestra's still loud in many cases, but you need to come through. And that takes the right kind of technique, the right kind of approach, the right decisions on how much to give and when. And then in order to get your voice and your body to do that, and still be able to go to the highs that are coming in the second act and get all the way to the end, the marathon by the third act, I think it just takes a very special set of physical traits, good discipline, and experience.
So it's like a big mind game.
To be fair, nearly every role in opera is that way, even the short ones. Yeah, you can get up and you can just sing them willy-nilly and just throw out sound. And if you've got a good enough technique and a good enough voice, you can get through it and it's fine. And sometimes people are even successful doing that, and they have careers where they sort of burn hot and short. That does happen, not too infrequently. But the people who are singing for longer careers, that have sung for 20, 30, even 40 years, there are a couple that have even made it 50, but that's nearly unheard of. But these people, they're smart. They're making good choices. They aren't going into any role willy-nilly and just throwing it against the wall and hoping it's okay. They're making good decisions. And I feel like it doesn't matter how short your role is, it will be better if you give it the time and respect to figure out how it should be done. Tristan, to bring it back to Tristan, if you figure out how you, with your body and your voice, need to get through it, when you get to the end, you'll find yourself in not too terrible of shape. There's no shortage of people who get to the end and you feel like, man, if it were 4 notes longer, they wouldn't have made it. They're just hanging on by the hair of their chin. And, maybe they are. But I feel like once you've really mapped it out, figured it out, and know what you need to do, you're going to get to the end okay. I am fortunate enough that the third act, which is the most challenging, and that some people call it the Tristan test, that plays to my strengths more than the first or second act. First and second act are great. I love them. But the third act, to bring back something we said, I feel like I can breathe a little bit more. I feel like I can just kind of go, whew, I know how to do this. I got this.
There's one final role, non-Wagner role, I want to ask you about also.
Yeah, go ahead.
Peter Grimes.
Oh,
Perhaps the most psychological of all the tenor roles.
I loved singing it. I was scared of that role. That's one of just a select few roles that I've walked into scared. And it wasn't that I was worried that I couldn't sing it. I knew I could sing it. I had the notes, the words, and the rhythms. I wasn't worried about that. There was a part of me that was worried a bit about the language. It's English, so you'd think, oh, it's fine. But no, it's a very specific dialect of English. And if you ask the majority of British connoisseurs, they're going to say that is the British opera masterpiece. That is the one that they hold on the highest pedestal. And so the first time I did it, I was working with a director who's British, and his first Peter Grimes was John Vickers. He was working with Peter Pears and Benjamin Britten. And so I kind of felt like, okay, I'm scared. I'm worried about this piece. I got through that. I was lucky to have a really wonderful English diction coach, who's a singer, but also an English diction coach and still active today, Stephen Chandri. I was lucky enough to work with him that quickly I got over my fear of the language, and it became just about the character and just about the journey that this character goes on. It is very, very dependent on the director and the director's vision. So often he is portrayed relatively sympathetically, and then it's a game of how much sympathy can we keep while bringing in the less desirable parts of him. And that's also a part of the story. Is he a pedophile? Is he unlucky? Is he negligent? Is he abusive? How abusive is he? Is it casually? Is it aggressively? If you go back to the book that it's based on, no, he was horrible. He was a horrible human being with just about the worst of all versions of that. And if you're going to find a director who wants to go with that character, that takes a real, in my case, I would say toll on the performer. I'm a bit more method than some people, so I do take on the emotional journey of the character frequently. And Peter Grimes is a dangerous one to do that with. I was lucky enough that in the first one, he was more misunderstood than he was horrible. He certainly made a lot of bad decisions. He certainly wasn't the kind of person that you'd probably wish to be in your life, but it wasn't because he was a terrible person. It's because of the set of problems and the background that he had. So it's difficult to say what kind of person is he or what is that psychological journey. I think, no, as we all know, villains don't view themselves as the villains. Bad people don't think they're bad. That's the judgment that other people put on them. And so you can't play yourself as a villain or as a terrible human being. You have to play yourself as somebody who is simply doing what they need to do, doing what is justified in the moment based on what is happening in their life and in their head. And then the audience needs to decide if and when it's a terrible thing. So if your actions, either deliberately or negligently, lead to the death of people, you need to be able to sell that in a way. I don't mean that the audience needs to feel like, oh, that was the right decision in that moment. No, that's not what I'm saying. We're not going to get there. But you can't play it like, okay, guys, now I'm going to do a bad thing. Are you ready? Here goes. It needs to come from a genuine place for me. Other people, I'm sure, would view it in their own personal way.
I've only seen Peter Grimes once with Anthony Dean Grippy, who's actually from my home state, North Carolina.
Yeah, that was a dream role for him. It's what he always wanted to do from the beginning.
The big takeaway from me as the audience member was like, Carl Jung in psychology talks so much about the shadow side that we all have. That we have the good parts of ourselves, but we all have the dark side. Like, okay, what is my dark side? Like, I think you can throw the audience for a loop also, like, oh, are the good parts about me actually bad?
And that one of the things that he did so well with that role is he brought this innocence. He started doing it when he was so young, much younger than the majority of people who sing that role. And, people will argue whether he was justified in that or not. But the end result had this kind of naivete to it. This, dare I say, sweetness. A bit of a Lenny in Old Mice and Men. He himself he's a big guy. And he brought this sweetness and gentleness in a way, all while being, yelling and being demeaning and doing horrible things. He somehow still had that innocence. And I think that contradiction really played well and worked for him in a way that people, if they do their first Peter Grimes when they're 50, 60, something like that, that's really difficult to capture. But the fact that he did it when he was he even 30 when he did it?
What do you have coming up? And are there any dream roles that you haven't sung yet that you want to sing?
So coming up, I've got more Tristan and Isolde's coming up. I've got a couple Sigmunds as well. I'm actually going to be in China in a month and a half or something, which will be the first time I've sung there. It's never been a goal, but yeah, kind of cool. We'll check it out and see how it goes.
Free vacation.
Yeah.
I mean, not vacation for you, but for the family, maybe if they go.
Well, it's good. It's short enough, and it's short enough that they're not going to come. Plus, I have to hurry up and get back really fast to sing a Tristan and Isolde before I, and then I'll head back out, and then I'll get to the family. So that'll be a bit of a whirlwind. There's one thing that I am looking forward to that a bit touches on a dream role. In just under a year, I'll be doing a production of Das Wunder der Liane by Erich Korngold, which isn't terribly well known. It's his second most famous opera. His most famous opera is Die Todesstadt. They are similar in the way that they sing and the way that, someone has to get through them. The type of voice that is called for in that. I've never done Die Todesstadt. I've always wanted to. I put Paul in Die Todesstadt in the same category that I always put Tristan in. It's in that category of, I really hope someday I can do that. Both with Tristan and with Paul, I've turned them down a lot of times. I said no to both of them for a lot of years. Until the day that I didn't say no to Tristan.
What changed? Age or?
I would say it was a number of things, but in the end, it was the fact that I'd had enough experience and enough time, gone through enough as a singer that I felt like it was getting closer and closer and closer. But then I had the fortune, I have to say, at this point, although I was never really sure whether it was fortune or misfortune, of having a director who I love working with, who I admire, who has always seen things in me that I wasn't sure I saw in myself, who's believed in me forever, come to me and say, well, long story short, he was doing it, or he might be doing it. He hadn't committed, but he wanted me to do it, and he wanted to work with me, and he wanted me to think about it, and whether I said yes or no, it was totally fine. But if I said no, he was going to say no. So I thought, and it was 3 years out or something before this was going to happen, and I thought, geez, do I really want to say yes to this? I don't know if I'm ready. I don't know if I feel like I could do it. It's always felt outside of it's. I've always been, for all the roles that I do, I've always felt like I am enough. My voice, my technique, my body, it's enough. It's there. This was the one that had me going, am I? And I thought, well, I might as well give it a shot. If I get most of the way down the road and it's just not working, I know he will understand. He'll be disappointed and frustrated, but he will understand if I come close to the end and go, I just can't do this. It's just not working. It's just not going to be okay for me. But for him and for that situation, I decided to say yes. And I was far down that road, very far down that road, before I was really certain that the answer should have been yes. All the way up till frighteningly close to the end, I was going, this is okay, right? This is going to work. And I knew I could do it. And I knew I could do it healthfully. And I knew it would be okay. But I didn't know if it was right. And that came very late. That came very late, being able to say that. But because of that, and because of that experience with Tristan, I now have more confidence to say yes to Paul. So that's a very meandering way to get to your question. Are there any dream roles that I haven't sung yet? That would be one. I would put that on that list. I'd love to sing Andrea Chenier. I recently, regrettably, had to turn down a Manon Lescaut, which was never on my list of operas to sing. But having learned it, yeah, that probably should have been on my list. That's an amazing opera. So wonderful to sing, such great music. And I may never get a chance to sing it again. And I don't know, that would be one that I would love to get another shot at singing.
Nice. When you were talking about your journey with Tristan and not knowing if you would be ready or not, it made me think about earlier when I was saying someone was telling me that I seem like a confident person, and I was saying, no, I question myself all the time. It gave me a little bit of confirmation when you were saying like, how much you were not sure if you could do it, that you tried anyway. It's like, well, I have those situations in my life all the time, and okay, like other people have it also. So that was very normalizing for me to hear that. So I appreciate that.
I've been fortunate to have had in my life. I have a number of characteristics that are just built within me, either because of deliberate mental fortitude or just the way that I'm wired, plus a certain set of circumstances that have come my way through just fate, life, that I have developed a reputation for being solid and stable in any situation. If you have a situation that's going to be terrible and it's going to be stressful and really difficult for anyone to come out the other side of it, call Rick. He'll figure it out. I can keep my nerves in control in the right way. My technique is good enough. My body is strong enough. And my voice behaves in a way that even in a really, really difficult situation, I'll be okay. I will get through it. And so my questions of will I be enough almost never has anything to do with, am I going to be able to get to the end of this opera, or am I going to crash and burn? It's almost never that question. The question is, am I able to bring to the stage and to the audience what needs to be brought, what needs to be there? I was once asked to sing a world premiere, a title role. The person who was singing it and had learned it and rehearsed it and was ready to go broke their leg just before the final dress. They needed someone to come in, learn it that evening, sing the final dress, and be ready to sing the performance, the world premiere, 2 days later. And they said, well, nobody knows this. We need somebody who can learn it quickly and get on stage and actually do it. So they called me because, that's what people do, I guess. So as it turned out, I went in, I looked at it, I learned it as best I could, sang at the final dress that night. At the premiere, the person who was originally supposed to do it ended up singing it in a wheelchair from the side of the stage while somebody else acted. So I didn't actually sing it at the premiere, which I'm okay with. Trust me, that was not my best work, but I could do it. And it's that level of, I don't think of it as confidence in myself, but I realize to other people, it probably looks like that. My wife always says that I thrive under pressure, that I thrive under stress. In really difficult situations, that's where I shine brightest. She's right for a number of reasons, but primarily because she's my wife. But, that's something that's always been kind of built within me. So, just thinking that when I say things like, am I enough? I think we all have our own strengths and weaknesses. We have the things and the reasons that we say we're not. And pretty much nobody cares. They just want you to be enough.
I guess the last question I'd like to ask you is, do you think, or how do you think opera has helped you, become to that place of like living a life of authenticity? How has it shaped you? How can it help other people do the same? And I guess, what does it mean for a person to become who they truly are?
That's a journey. I'm not sure we ever finish. I'm not sure we ever get there. I'm going to contradict that in just a moment, I think. But we're always in a constant state of trying to be the best version of ourselves and the best we can be in that specific moment, whether it's on the way up or the way down. I think in becoming who you're meant to be, or becoming who you truly are, or something, I think we have an idea when we're young. Even when we're kids, we have an idea. This is who I am. And frequently when you're a kid, it comes through role models, and you step up to the plate and you're Joe DiMaggio and you think, I'm going to hit this. I'm Babe Ruth. I'm whoever it is. And then you get a bit older, and maybe instead of thinking of the all-time greats, you think of the people who are successful today, and you step up and you try to be that person in whatever field you're in. And then a little while later, you say, okay, I'm going to try to be the best person in this group. What would that person do? I'm going to try to be at that level. And I feel like we kind of continually pare our dreams down. And you can argue whether that's a good thing or a bad thing. But I think what ultimately happens when you become who you are meant to be, I think you spent enough time being Joe DiMaggio, Babe Ruth, Hank Aaron, being whoever it is that you've chosen to be, and stopped being all those things, and you've realized you don't care. You've made a career, you've made a life that is its own information. And you realize that in attempting to be all these other people, you've found yourself. And at that point, you stop worrying about what other people are thinking and how they're judging you. And to a degree, you stop judging yourself, and you start realizing that what you've done leading up to this moment and what you're doing now, and most specifically, what you're going to do tomorrow, has enough inherent value that it doesn't matter. You just do what you need to do and what you know to be good and right.
Well, Rick, thank you so much for taking us into your career and your life and your world, and sharing some of the different things that you learned from your long and successful career in opera. And I really appreciate your time.
I've had fun. Thank you. I'm glad you reached out, and I'm glad after so much time that we actually managed to make this happen.
Thanks so much for watching this episode of the Becoming Who You Truly Are podcast. If you'd like to learn more about Rick and his great work, you can check out his website and his YouTube channel, both of which are linked in the description box below. And until next time, I wish you nothing but the best in your journey of becoming all that you truly are.